Welcome to the DIY e-spinner discussion. This is Oscar. This is an e-spinner that I made for Joanna a couple weeks ago using less than $100 worth of parts. This video is a companion to an article that I put on the knitspinfarm.com blog. If you go to that page, knitspinfarm.com, look at the poorly maintained blog, you can scroll down to the DIY e-spinner discussion post. Here I've put all the details for some of the sort of big picture parts that I had to purchase and how I put them together and why. It shows sort of step-by-step considerations, including the appropriate use of hot glue. It also includes links to places like Amazon and GoBuildit.com where you can find useful parts like the pulleys or the motors. This spinner, which we call Oscar, is designed around the woolly winder that Joanna had for her Kromsky Polonaise spinning wheel. You're going to have to use some sort of flyer, and you can really use any flyer you want, and that's just going to determine how you build it. You have a lot of flexibility, but you need to make sure you have room for things like the motor controller, and any switches you want to use to operate it, as well as any scotch tension or other tensioning devices you want to use. Here you can see the front of the maiden of Oscar, and this is a good place to talk about bearings. I use bearings to support the flyer. A lot of spinning wheels just use leather straps, but bearings work pretty well because it allows for a nice friction-free high RPM movement. Let's talk a little bit about bearings and the importance of measuring things correctly. If you're like me, you might just take a very accurate tape measure to measure your flyer shaft diameter. Then you're going to say, oh, that's about a ½ inch. I'm going to buy a ½ inch bearing. Uh-oh, not so much. Just make sure you measure the diameter of your shaft accurately. Then you realize that, hey, this Kromsky Polonaise spinning wheel is about 13 millimeters. Let's try a 13 millimeter bearing instead. Yay! Here's an overview of some of the guts of the spinning wheel. That's a motor. It's a 775 motor. You can find links to that on the blog post. Here's another motor. It's also a 775 motor. And then here's another one. These came out of some old tools that I had laying around, a drill and a cordless reciprocating saw. You could use either of these and they work well, but they both have these permanent gears attached to the shafts, which you'd probably have to grind off if you wanted to use them. I decided to use one of these 775 DC motors because they're relatively cheap, they're relatively powerful, and they're relatively abundant. You can get one of these motors for as little as $6 from Jamco.com. Depending on how you want to use an e-spinner, you want a motor that's stronger or maybe even weaker than that. There'd be good reasons for both, and there's a lot of variety of motors out there that you can choose from. More details on this part on the blog post. Power is transferred from the motor to the flyer via a 16 millimeter aluminum pulley and a 3 millimeter polyurethane drive belt. Again, more information on the blog. The 30 amp reversible DC motor controller that I use to turn it on and off and control the speed has a switch which allows you to select a direction. In this case, it's spinning clockwise, and a handy speed dial which allows it to go from very slow to stupid fast. That would be stupid fast. And then if you want to switch directions for plying, you just flip the switch down into the other direction. Now it was nice because this motor controller that I purchased came pre-wired with the switch and the dial, so all I had to do was cut out a little spot in a piece of scrap aluminum to make a little panel and then hot glue it into place. Of note, you can do different ways to control the speed. You can use pulley ratios, so you could use the big flyer pulley with the small drive pulley to get a very high torque scenario, or you could use the larger drive pulley with the smaller flyer pulley to get the maximum speed. In practice though, it doesn't really matter. Because you can control the speed so well with that motor controller, we'd just end up using the small drive pulley with the small flyer pulley, and that worked really well. Again, here's a close-up of the power supply plug going to the wires which are going to the motor controller. So the motor controller wiring was really easy. You just do positive and negative DC terminals in, and then there are positive and negative wires that go out, and that just connects directly to the tabs on the motor. That's all you have to do, make 4 connections of wires. These white wires here are the pre-wired switch wires that go for both the on-off reversible switch and the speed control dial, which has setting from 0 to tacos, which is its fastest speed. I don't think Joanna's ever gotten anywhere as near tacos. This back piece on the rear maiden here is the only part that I actually measured in order to ensure that the flyer was straight and level with the front maiden. That was designed so that it just sort of twists out, and then you can remove the drive belt and the Scotch tension belt, and then you just sort of slide the flyer right out of the front bearing. And there you go.
I like that I can sit on the couch in a very comfortable position and spin. I also like that my aging knee does not protest and I can spin for as long as I want. I think it spins exactly the same.
Exactly.
The only difference between this and my Kromsky wheel, even like mechanically, it's still the Woolly Winder. Mechanically, it's still Scotch tension. The only difference is that I'm not using my feet. Every other part of it is exactly the same for me.
Do you spin at the same speed?
Yes, I do. I do believe I spin at the same speed. The other thing that I really like about this is there's a lot of hot glue art in the front of the wheel. I mean, the Kromsky Polonaise is a very pretty wheel. I bought it so I could feel like Cinderella while I was spinning. But this here, this hot glue sculpture, is also pretty great. It's more like the modern contemporary art wheel. The sort of off-center symmetry of the front maiden. For plying, I think it's also sort of the same. It's, I can put a lot more Scotch tension on this than I can on the wheel because I don't have to treadle it. So I can have a lot more pull in and it doesn't affect, I don't have to treadle harder for the amount of tension. So plying maybe is easier because I can crank that Scotch tension up real high and it just pulls the yarn right onto it, which I like.
It's never bogged down on you.
Oh no, it has never bogged down on me.
And there's
I don't ever feel like I'm straining it or stressing it or that it's like, hold up girl, stop, too much. It's not great at long draw, but I don't spin a lot of long draw, so I'll just stick to my wheel for that. I think with long draw, my tempo is more irregular, and with the motor, it's always spinning at a constant speed. But with my long draw, I think that I slow down and speed up with my hand movements, and I can't really do that with the machine without stopping and adjusting this stuff. I'm really happy with this. I could see using this for like the rest of my days, just as it is. The one thing I actually would improve is that it's difficult to take the bobbin on and off because of the way it was designed. I have to pull out the spindle. Do you want me to show you?
Yep.
Okay. Here, let's take the yarn on. Okay, so when I change bobbins, it's not ideal. I have to loosen up the Scotch tension and pull the spindle out completely so that this here is free. And then I have to release the drive band and then slide this off. It's kind of a to-do, and the only part of it that could be improved is if this here were an open hook instead of a closed eyelet, and I could just slip this off and remove the Scotch tension from that side rather than having to take the whole spindle out.
I'm sorry, we don't have 10 cents in the budget for a hook screw at this point in time.
It's really great too, the design is I can change out, I have two flyers. I have the Woolly Winder flyer and I have a regular flyer for my Kromsky Polonaise, and this will fit both of them. So I can put this on my Polonaise if I want to use the Woolly Winder there, or I can put the other one here. It's not dedicated. Like, he looks silly and kind of naked right now, but he can just sit this way and I can use the flyers on my other wheels whenever I want. One of the other things that's great about the wheel is the internal bearings are the things that spin, so I don't ever have to oil it because this doggy eats oil. And he pooped really bad when he ate a lot of oil, and it made him very upset. Goof. I like that Oscar spins yarn good.